If you're interested in how the NFL schedule gets put together, then you're going to love the next guest that we have. We're privileged to be joined by. It is Onnie Bose, the NFL VP of Broadcasting, with us on Westwood One Sports Night. Onnie, let's start at the very top. The decision to have Patriots Seahawks open the season. Yes, it's a Super Bowl rematch, but it wasn't the closest of games in February. You have Dallas and Kansas City that could also visit. Chicago, even as well as going to Seattle. Take me into the room. How much time was spent figuring out what that matchup would be?
Sure. First of all, great to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity to chat with you a little bit. Look, the minute the Super Bowl ends, we sit there and Mike North and I are sitting next to each other in a booth at the Super Bowl, and you start scribbling, who do you want for kickoff? So yeah, great opponents for the Seahawks this year. Couple of thoughts there, right? One, just to the point about the game itself, I think, remind ourselves that the year before, Philadelphia, Kansas City was not the most competitive Super Bowl either. But we were eager to see that game. I understand it was part of a two-game series of Super Bowls they had played over 3 years. We put that game in week 2 on Fox, and it did a massive 30 million plus number. So I think we forget quickly, at some level, yes, the game and what impression, but it's still two teams that were in the Super Bowl. It is a Super Bowl rematch, and that phrase carries weight. We don't always get the rematch necessarily every season, but when we do, we look at it. And I think we look at it as the rematch is the rematch in the beginning of the season. If we played that game in week 14, hopefully that's still a great game between two teams at the top of their conference. But at kickoff in week 1, it carries that extra weight. So we felt good about that. To your point, great opponents that the Seahawks have, but those games will also carry their weight later in the season as well. So very comfortable with kind of ending up where we did.
Ani, do you view opening on a Wednesday night this year as a one-off because of the Australian game, or might we see more five-night opening weeks in the future, or maybe even more dates added?
Yeah, I think we might, right? Just, I think we broke the ground on Wednesday a few years ago with Christmas. We're playing another Wednesday this year on Thanksgiving Eve. We have played, multiple day weekends through the season. I think, we find those opportunities. Part of that the Wednesday, Thursday dynamic this year is because we're playing in Australia, and credit to the folks in Melbourne and Victoria. They said, hey, if we play Friday morning in Melbourne, 10:30 a.m. start. We will have 100,000 maniacal fans in that stadium, and it's going to be an incredible scene. So that worked out. That was a good opportunity for us to play that game in prime time on Thursday. We're able to work it out and play kickoff on Wednesday. Two really big, good games right off the bat. You're going to get a sense of the NFC West pretty quickly after the first 2 nights of the season. So, yes, I definitely think that's an opportunity. We were able to play in Brazil on Friday nights the last couple years, but that's always a factor of when that first Friday night of the year lands. So I think we have creative ways to start the season, and we are showing that we want to fall into these windows and create events where we can.
It's NFL VP of Broadcasting, Onnie Bose, that's with us here. And yes, you mentioned it. We might have buried the lead with last night's schedule reveal. You might have quite literally created a sports holiday with the first ever NFL game on Thanksgiving Eve. It's going to be the Packers and Rams on Netflix. How long was Thanksgiving Eve a conversation point? What went into adding that date?
I think it wasn't a big conversation point for years. I think it's as we've learned and observed, our fans tell us what they value, and we know Thanksgiving has been a big viewership day for a long time. There's tradition, right? We've been playing in Dallas and Detroit for decades. We added that night game maybe 20 years ago. It's been on NBC for 10 or 15 years. So we know that that's there. We've learned that Christmas has become that. We're getting big audiences. The fans show us that, yes, these are family times, but when we're together with our family, actually, we really enjoy watching the NFL. And so, we added Black Friday. There's a natural tie-in with our partners in Amazon Prime Video there, and we were learning, those dynamics. And we just kind of look at where are these other places on the calendar? There aren't that many of them, but where everybody's off the next day. If you can get to playing that game. And that Wednesday night kind of popped on our radar over the last year, and it was something to just think about. And, when we got it out there and Netflix does have that game, the market responded. They were like, oh, we're really interested in that. That's a different window. Let's see what we can learn. We don't know anything about it. We've never played there. It's not been traditionally a big sports night, but we know that it's a night that people are off the next day. And we feel really optimistic. We feel like we have a great game there. And the Rams are incredibly excited to be hosting that game. So, we'll learn a lot, but we're excited for what it could be.
As Mike Golick pointed out with us last night, it's a big night for the Utes where everybody gets back into their hometown and they're
Yep.
texting their old high school buddies. And what's
Yep.
going to be on the screen at all the old college bars or local bars? Well, they're probably going to be watching the Rams and the Packers on Netflix. Onnie Bose is with us here, VP of NFL Broadcasting. Let's go back towards the beginning of the schedule. In week 2, the Buffalo Bills open their brand new stadium with the Detroit Lions visiting on Thursday Night Football. You only get to open a new barn once. This is historic, and we're seeing the ticket prices skyrocket, $650, $700 being the get-in price. What considerations went into when that game would happen, where it would be broadcast, and who
Yep.
the opponent was?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was going to be in week 1 or 2, almost assuredly. It's a chance Buffalo could have started the season with a 2-game road trip, but we were going to put it in a high-profile spot, right? Was it going to land on Sunday night, Monday night, Thursday night? Through the scheduling process, we see thousands of iterations of the schedule. I am sure that we saw that game on any number of those nights. I'm sure CBS or Fox might have loved to have it in the afternoon, but we thought, let's put it in prime time. These shows have big pregame shows and everything else. And, it landed there for a bunch of different reasons. We knew that we were going to play them against a strong opponent, right? That game was really appealing because of the culture in Buffalo and the Bills Mafia and the fans and everything else that it means there. But it's also all our partners knew it's probably going to be a really good Buffalo Bills home game. Would love to have that game. So Lions Bills feels like an incredible matchup. It's one you want to see. If we ever got that matchup in the Super Bowl, the world might explode from those fan bases. So it feels fun. It feels great. Amazon has an incredible pregame show. They're always on site. You know that Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to lean into that and that full experience. So they might just have a separate pregame show for another hour or two of him just roaming the parking lots before the game. But it's going to be fun. I know that Amazon and our partners are excited. I know the Bills are excited, and it's a great way to kick off week 2 of the season, coming off a huge week 1.
Got to tell our teammate Ian Eagle to bring that Ryan Fitzpatrick like energy on Westwood One Sports that Thursday
Oh
night.
yeah.
Onnie Bose is with us, NFL VP of Broadcasting. Let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs, which has the bulk of their marquee games later in the season. How much did Patrick Mahomes' injury status impact the way you scheduled their first month?
Look, you have to acknowledge it, but ultimately they're going to play in prime time and in big games throughout the year, right? So and people can analyze it in a bunch of different ways, but they're playing on Monday Night Football in week 1. They're playing on Sunday Night Football in week 2. So it's not like we were hiding them or saying that we're not going to
Sure.
do that. So I think the schedule we saw, again, many different iterations of the schedule, falls the way it falls. But I think our view, you know talking about this, right? Everyone said, "Oh, Patrick, he is determined, he's relentless. Never, no one's ever going to underestimate him. We don't know anything more than anybody else does. Maybe some of your colleagues and insiders have some more insight than we do, but we were very comfortable just saying, if he's there, he's there. But the Chiefs are going to play in prime time. That's a massive AFC West division game, no matter what. So if it's Patrick, great. It's going to be an incredible scene at Arrowhead on week 1 and Monday Night Football. Either way, so we felt really good and comfortable. That's a great way for ESPN and Monday Night Football to start the season.
Less in the context of the Chiefs, but more 1,000-foot view, Ani. Given the variance of results of a season, and obviously injuries factor into that as well, how much differently does the league think about scheduling weeks 1, 2, 3, and 4 versus scheduling later in the season?
Um, it's a really good and interesting question. Look, I think we all want to kind of feel big and get off to a strong start. We put a lot of focus on week 1. You've already touched on kickoff. We just talked about Monday Night Football. That Sunday Night Football game is a massive one. It's a classic week 1 Sunday Night Football, but look at all the optimism around the Giants. So Cowboys Giants, it's kind of hard to go wrong. But I'll point out also double header. Fox and CBS have a big game at 425. Good big division games. Green Bay, Minnesota, Washington, Philadelphia. We clearly put a focus on that. We want to do that. We want strong games in every week. We want them, the prime time, the double headers. I think you can see that there, but I think we're less kind of focused and prescriptive. Yes, we'd like to see it. We like to see, you know, good games in every week, but it's a little slightly less necessarily two, three, four. We know we're back heavy. We know we're going huge on Thanksgiving. We know we're going huge on Christmas. We know there's, Saturday windows and things like that. The overall balance between 2 and 12 is just let's make sure we have strong games in all our windows.
When you collaborate with NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell or bring him certain things or ask his input on scheduling, what things are most important to him? Paint some of a picture of what he's like in some of these collaborations.
Sure. I mean, one is that, we'll meet with him, at the start of this process, just, what are the high level, what are the things we're thinking about, what are his strategic goals, what are Hans Schroeder, who leads our team and runs the scheduling process, we'll get that level of input. And then we'll probably meet with him monthly through the process. And then over the last stretch through April weekly, and then over in May, we met with him daily. He is deep in the weeds with us on those details. Look, I think his priorities are the same as ours. And I think for our teams and our fans, right? When we make a schedule, first priority is competitive balance and equity, right? We cannot do unfair things to the teams. We have to balance all that. There are hard and fast rules. And then sometimes there's kind of, more subtle things, but every team has to follow and make sure that there's balance in their schedule. Are there things that a coach or a team may not like? Sure, that's inevitable, but there are lines that we won't cross. That's number one. But number two, our guiding principle is from a scheduling and a media point of view is let's make sure our biggest, most attractive games get into the windows where more of our fans can watch them. That commissioner is very much aligned with that, and that's a driver, right? Let's make sure that we have great games for our fans to watch in the biggest windows. And at the same time, and he was very focused on this, Sunday afternoon is the backbone of our league. Still, no matter what team you root for, most of their games are Sunday afternoon. And so if in your local market you're getting your game, great, that's a win. There's always going to be a really good 425 game. But if your team is in prime time or on a bye, we want to make sure that CBS and Fox have a really good 1 o'clock game to take to a big chunk of the country too. So we are fully aligned on that with him from the beginning.
As you mentioned, it's NFL VP of Broadcasting, Onnie Bose, with us here. We spent a lot of time talking about the beginning of the schedule, so it's only fitting we close things by talking about the end. It ends Valentine's Day 2027. Of course, Westwood One is the exclusive audio home of Super Bowl 61. And one common wish from the sports fan, it feels the common sports fan has always asked, why can't the day after the Super Bowl be a national holiday? Well, this year it actually is, with President's Day being Monday, February 15th. How comfortable are you in the league with the season ending that far out? And might the President's Day pairing be more of a regular occurrence, especially if the league looks at going to 18?
Yeah, right now, this is a function of the calendar. We are on the latest possible kind of start of the season because Labor Day is the latest possible date, and that's a function. And yeah, it'll be a really interesting one. We knew when we went from 16 to 17 games and a 18-week season, this was going to land at some point. To your point, if we get to an 18-game season, that becomes a very real thing. There's a lot of nuances in an 18-game season, including how many buys do you have and other things. So that'll be a real focus we have to have. What is the start of the season? What is the end of the season? But, people have wanted this for a long time. They've talked about it. It'll be really interesting to see, does that actually, make people stick around and watch more of the game? Any game has a tail off at the end of the night. People have to go to bed. They have to go to work. I'm very curious to see what that'll be like. And on top of it, just as we play over every other holiday, we might as well play on Valentine's Day too.
I never have been diminished more in a question I've asked than asking an actual sitting governor whether he would consider making a state holiday the day after the Super Bowl. He's like, no, people need to work. I'm like, oh, okay, got it, sure.
Yeah.
Onnie Bose, NFL VP of Broadcasting. Appreciate your time. Obviously, anything NFL works for Westwood One Sports, and our relationship's great with you guys. Thank you so much for making the time.
You got it, Josh. Thank you. We appreciate your guys' partnership, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this for hours. So thanks for spending some time with me.